"Get out of the pool!" my mother shouted at my children, her voice slicing through the music and chatter. "This party is for respectable family only, not divorced failures." 50 guests turned toward us. Lila stood in the shallow end water, clinging to her lashes. Ollie froze beside me, towel slipping from his hands. No one defended us. Not my siblings, not a single so-called family friend, just silence thick enough to choke on. I gathered our towels, each drip echoing, the kind of humiliation you don't forget. I didn't argue, didn't cry. We walked out wet, shaking, holding on to each other. But the real story didn't start at that pool. It started the next morning when her realtor called. My name is Sadie, and somewhere along the way, I became the person who keeps her voice low so others don't raise theirs. Not because I'm weak, just because I learned early that quiet is sometimes the only space left for someone like me. Growing up with my mother, Evelyn, meant living under a spotlight I never asked for and could never escape. She didn't nag, she performed. Every gathering, every holiday, every small moment was a stage where she needed to shine, and the rest of us learned to dim ourselves to make room. My children, Lila and Ollie, are the opposite of dim. Lila is 8 and sees the world like pages of a storybook, bright, emotional, impossible to ignore. Ollie is 6, soft-hearted and shy, holding on to me as if I'm the anchor he trusts in every room. They deserve a childhood without fear of becoming someone's punchline, especially not their grandmother's. I work as a software engineer, the kind of job people underestimate because it doesn't come with luxury handbags or fancy business cards. It's stable, quiet work that pays for our life, our routines, our safety. And for years, I let my family believe it was mediocre because correcting them felt pointless. Let them think I was barely getting by. Let them think simplicity was failure. Peace mattered more to me than proving anything. My sister Monica sits comfortably in Evelyn's approval, always polished, always agreeable. The golden child who learned to nod instead of push back. My brother Darren built a different survival strategy he avoids. Conflict with Olympic-level skill, drifting to the edges of any argument until no one remembers he's there. It's not that they're cruel, they just know Evelyn's storms and choose not to stand in the rain. And then there's the beach house, the one place my children loved without hesitation. To them it meant waves brushing the shore, sandy feet on the patio, and sunset walks with snacks in hand, and to Evelyn, it was something else entirely, a symbol she wielded like proof that her life, her family, her choices were superior to anyone looking in from the outside. What she never knew, what none of them knew, was that I owned the place. I had bought it years ago and let her rent it at a fraction of its worth. Not because she deserved it, but because I thought giving her something beautiful might soften the hard edges between us. It didn't. In my own home, the one I chose deliberately for its warmth rather than its size, life is slower. I fold laundry while my kids tell me stories. We cook simple meals. We make space for each other's feelings. There is no competition there, no measuring of worth, no whispered rankings of who is doing better in life. But as much as I tried to shield my children from my family's hierarchy, the pool party proved something I had ignored for too long. Evelyn never saw us as family. She saw us as an inconvenience she tolerated until she didn't. The morning of the pool party started with the kind of excitement only children can generate. Lila woke me up by climbing onto my bed, already wearing her swimsuit under her clothes. Ollie dragged his bucket of beach toys to the front door, insisting we might need them just in case the pool gets boring. I packed sunscreen, snacks, towels, the normal things a mother carries when she wants her kids to feel included, even if she herself is bracing for something else. The drive to the beach house took a little over half an hour winding through coastal roads, where the ocean appeared and disappeared between houses. Lila hummed along with a song on the radio. Ollie kicked his feet against the seat, staring out the window. I tried to enjoy their joy, to let it soften the knot in my stomach, but years of being around my mother had taught me to expect a shift in the weather even on the sunniest days. When we arrived, the place was buzzing, more crowded than I expected. People in sunglasses lounged by the pool. Kids splashed at the far end. My mother stood near the patio with a cluster of women from her book club, the ones who always spoke just a notch too loudly when they were trying to sound impressive. Lila spotted two cousins she recognized. She grabbed Ollie's hand and they ran ahead, their towels bouncing behind them. I followed, carrying the bag, doing my best to disappear into the flow of the party without needing Evelyn's approval. I didn't even make it to the shaded part of the patio before it happened. "Get out of the pool." Her voice cut through the air like a blade. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Water splashing slowed. I turned toward the shallow end and saw Lila climbing down the ladder, her smile fading the second she realized the shout was meant for her. My mother stepped forward, voice louder, clearer, as if she wanted to make sure every last person heard her judgment. "This party is for respectable family, only not divorced failures." The words floated above the water, sharp and unmistakable. My children froze. Lila's hands gripped the cold metal ladder, her face pinking with confusion. Ollie pressed into my legs so tightly it almost hurt. 50 guests stared at us, some pretending not to, some openly watching. No one said a word. Not Monica, who stood by the snack table pretending to adjust her bracelet. Not Darren, who lowered his eyes to his phone. Not any of the people who had eaten meals at my table, who had smiled at my children, who claimed they were like family. I walked to the edge of the pool and held out a towel. Lila stepped out slowly, water cascading down her arms. I wrapped her up, pulled Ollie close, and gathered our things. Every drip from our clothes felt like a clock ticking inside my chest. No yelling, no arguing, just silence. We reached the car before either child spoke. Then Lila's voice came small and cracked. "Why does Grandma hate us?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was simple and devastating, I had allowed this to go on too long. I had allowed my mother's cruelty to shape the room we all stood inside. And in that moment, I knew something had broken, not in me, but in whatever was left of the fragile peace I had tried so hard to maintain. That night, after the kids fell asleep curled against each other on the couch, I sat at my small dining table in the dim light and listened to the quiet of our house. Not the tense, suffocating quiet of earlier. This was different. It felt like a pause between heartbeats the moment before a decision hardens into certainty. I pulled out the drawer where I kept a folder of documents I never planned to use in any dramatic way. Property records, rental agreements, payment summaries, notes from the years I'd managed the beach house through a local property company. Nothing flashy, nothing complicated, just the practical truths of a woman who built her life quietly and refused to perform it for anyone. I spread everything across the table: the beach house address, the purchase date from years ago, Evelyn's monthly rental payments reduced to less than a third of the going rate because I thought making life easier for my mother would make our relationship easier too. That illusion shattered the second she told my children they didn't belong in a pool I paid to maintain. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't quicken. The anger wasn't loud. It was focused, clean, almost cold. Revenge wasn't the point. Boundaries were. I emailed the property management company, copying the exact clause in her lease, outlining the 60-day termination policy for month-to-month tenants. Then I asked them to issue formal notice first thing in the morning. I closed the laptop, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, the call came right on schedule. "Hi, this is Coastal Property Management," a calm voice said. "We've notified your tenant that the beach house lease is being terminated by the owner." I thanked them and ended the call just as my phone lit up again. "Mom." I let it ring once before answering. "What is this?" Evelyn's voice was already raised, sharp and indignant. "I got a message saying the beach house owner isn't renewing my lease." "Is this some mistake?" "No," I said. "Just that." "Well, who do I talk to? I've been a loyal tenant. I have rights. Someone must have complained about me." "Was it you?" "You'll need to follow the instructions in the notice." "You're not answering my question." "Sadie?" Her voice vibrated with disbelief, the same tone she used when a cashier dared tell her a coupon expired. "Are you behind this?" Instead of explaining, I said I have to take the kids to school and hung up. 10 minutes later, Monica texted Mom is panicking. "What did you do? She was harsh yesterday, but you didn't have to go nuclear." Darren left a voicemail. "This is petty, Sadie. Just let it go." She didn't mean it, but I wasn't interested in defending my pain to people who couldn't even defend my children when it mattered. By noon, Evelyn called again. This time her voice wasn't angry. It was frightened. Please call me back. Where am I supposed to go for the summer? Everything near the coast is booked. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because silence was the only language she had ever ignored until now. And suddenly, it was the only one I was willing to speak. The official notice from the rental board arrived 9 days after the pool incident, an email confirming the date and time of the hearing Evelyn had requested. I read it once, twice, then closed my laptop. Of course, she filed a complaint. Evelyn had spent her entire life believing consequences were optional for people like her. She must have thought the hearing would end with someone apologizing to her for the inconvenience. For a while, I didn't think about the hearing. Life kept moving. Breakfasts had to be made, lunches packed, bedtime stories read. But every few days, another message arrived, long voicemails from Evelyn, begging, bargaining, occasionally, threatening to cut ties entirely if I didn't intervene with the landlord. Monica sent guilt-laced texts about family harmony and not traumatizing Mom. Darren sent a link to a random article about eviction laws as if that somehow proved I was being unreasonable, but none of them ever mentioned what happened at the pool, not once. The morning of the hearing, I dropped Lila and Ollie at school and drove to the municipal building in the center of town. It sat between a bank and an ice cream shop, a simple place with glass doors and beige walls, hardly the dramatic courtroom my mother probably imagined. I checked in at the front desk, was given a badge, and walked into hearing room B. The room held one long table for respondents, one for complainants, and a small raised platform where the hearing officer would sit. When I arrived, only 2 other people were there, the assistant clerk and the officer herself, a woman in her 50s with glasses and a calm, measured presence. I took a seat at the respondent's table, setting down the folder I had prepared. I kept everything neatly arranged: statements from the property management company, screenshots of messages from guests who had reached out after the pool incident, records of Evelyn's rental history, and the original purchase documents for the beach house. I didn't plan to wield any of it like a weapon. I just didn't plan to hide anymore. The door opened sharply. Evelyn walked in dressed in a crisp navy blazer and holding a leather portfolio she must have bought for occasions where she needed to look important. Her lawyer followed behind a man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd been briefed only with Evelyn's version of events. She froze when she saw me sitting at the respondent's table. "What are you doing over there?" she demanded, voice shrill enough that the clerk flinched. I didn't answer. The hearing officer stepped in before I had to. "Ms. Wilson," she said, addressing my mother, "please take your seat. We'll begin shortly." "Why is she sitting on that side?" Evelyn hissed, pointing at me. "She's not the landlord. She's the one who caused all this trouble." The officer looked down at her file. According to the documents submitted, Sadie Wilson is listed as the property owner. She is the respondent. My mother blinked as if trying to force her brain to rewrite the sentence. "That's impossible," she said. Laughing stiffly, "She doesn't own property. She can barely afford her rent." The officer raised an eyebrow. "The deed record on file is clear." I opened my folder and slid a copy of the purchase document forward, not dramatically, not triumphantly, just factually. The paper's edge made a soft sound against the table, quiet but definitive. Evelyn's lawyer leaned toward her, whispering urgently. Her jaw tightened, her gaze flicked from the paper to my face, her expression collapsing into something I wasn't sure I'd ever seen on her fear. The hearing began. Her lawyer spoke first, claiming the lease termination was retaliatory, that Evelyn had been unfairly targeted after enforcing reasonable boundaries at a private gathering. He used the phrase elder discrimination, which almost made me laugh. My mother had never positioned herself as vulnerable in her entire life. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my voice calm, steady. The gathering she references, I said, took place at my property. My mother invited over 50 guests without informing me. She then publicly expelled my minor children from the pool, calling them children from a broken home, and calling me a divorced failure. I have statements from witnesses and messages sent to me afterward. I slid the printed screenshots forward. The officer read them silently. Evelyn's lawyer protested. "Hearsay." The officer held up a hand. "These statements aren't being used to determine guilt. They establish context." I continued. I gave my mother a deeply discounted rental rate for years far below what the property is worth. Ending a month-to-month lease after a violation of trust is within my rights as the property owner. Evelyn slammed her palm on the table. "This is humiliating," she said through clenched teeth. "You're doing this to punish me for one bad moment. You're making a spectacle out of your own mother." The officer's gaze sharpened. "We are here to decide whether your landlord violated housing laws. Personal conflicts are not grounds for intervention." "It's not personal," Evelyn snapped. "She's retaliating because I asked her children to leave the pool." The officer looked at her evenly. "From what I understand, the pool is on the respondent's property. She didn't tell anyone she owned it." Evelyn cried. "How was I supposed to know?" I answered softly. "You didn't ask." For a moment, the room was silent, so silent I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. There it was. The truth laid bare. Evelyn had spent years treating me like someone beneath her, someone incapable, someone small. And now, confronted with undeniable evidence that she had been wrong, she didn't know how to stand in a world where I didn't fit the role she assigned me. The officer closed her folder. "The complaint is dismissed. The lease termination stands." The gavel didn't slam, there was no dramatic sound, just a final sentence that settled like a stone in the air. As people began filing out, Evelyn hurried to catch up with me in the hallway. "You made a fool out of me," she spat, though her voice trembled. "In front of everyone." "No," I said quietly. "You did that on your own. You could have warned me. You could have told me you owned the house. You could have treated my children with compassion." Her mouth opened-closed. For once, she had no script. "I didn't know," she whispered finally. I didn't think that I said was always the problem, and I walked past her calm, steady, unhurried, leaving her to sit with the truth she had spent a lifetime refusing to look at. Evelyn moved out of the beach house 2 weeks before her notice expired. I didn't watch the moving trucks. I didn't drive by. I didn't need to. The silence that followed was enough. For the first time in years, my phone stopped buzzing with demands, corrections, reminders of who she believed I should be. I listed the beach house at its real market value. Within 3 days, it booked out for the entire summer. Every payment that came in went straight into 2 separate savings accounts, one labeled for Lila, one for Ollie. I didn't tell them where the money came from. I just told them their future was safe. On weekends, when the house was empty, I took the kids down to the coast. We swam in the same pool they'd once been chased out of. Lila dipped her hand across the surface of the water and said, "It feels different now." And she was right. It wasn't a place of humiliation anymore. It belonged to them as much as it belonged to me. 6 months later, on a cold December afternoon, Evelyn knocked on my door. Her voice was small when she asked to see the kids. She bent down, apologized to them first, then to me. I accepted the apology, but the boundaries stayed exactly where I put them. I've learned that dignity isn't something anyone can grant or take away. It's what you protect, even when the people who should love you decide to test it. My children and I built a life where kindness is the rule, not the exception, where we choose peace without surrendering our worth. If you've ever had to draw a line with your own family, share your story below. And if this one stayed with you, subscribe so you don't miss the next.